what happens? Like, where does this go? We send another $60 billion to Ukraine.
Most of that money goes to 5 major U.S. defense contractors.
Yes.
To replace at 5 times the cost what the weapons cost that we already sent the Ukrainians. Meaning, if we send them something that was built 10 years ago, well, now it's going to cost 4 and 5 times as much. So again, it's a massive grift paid by a Pentagon that doesn't know how to buy stuff cost effectively. It doesn't change the outcome on the battle. As the fields dry, it's May now, coming up on tank season.
Is it tank season again?
Weather still matters in warfare. And, if you have a wet, snow-covered farm field, it's very muddy, very gooey, not great for tanks.
Mud season.
I think the Russians call it the Great Rasputitsa, the Great Slush.
Yeah.
That's done now. And as June comes, it'll be game on. And I think the Russian bear is hungry, and they're going to have a time. So the war should have been ended, never should have started. They should have made a deal, froze the lines 6 months into it.
Well,
but the Biden administration believed that all this American weaponry would have saved the day. It hasn't, and it's ugly. And the Russian commanders are not idiots. They know their history. The Battle of Kursk, which happened just north of where the fighting is now, was the largest tank battle in history. It was the last offensive effort of the German army against the Soviets. And they tried to push from the north and south on this salient. It was a bulge. And the Russians knew they were coming. And so they built lots of lines of defenses. It's the same thing they've done now, that they did last summer, which ate up all that equipment. And now the Ukrainians are very thin. They've had a lot of corruption issues. All the defenses that were supposed to be built by the Ukrainians are much smaller or non-existent. And so now it's allowing maneuver, and especially as the fields dry and you can maneuver, it's going to be a very ugly summer. Very ugly summer.
What do you think the Russians want?
I'd say now they want to absolutely humiliate the West and make sure that they never have a problem with Ukraine again.
What happens to Ukraine?
I don't know if it survives as an independent country. If they take Odessa, if they take the ability for Ukraine to export its grain, that really threatens the long-term economic viability. Maybe it goes back to, look, Western Ukraine used to be part of Poland.
Right.
Eastern Ukraine used to be part of Russia. So, maps move depending on, military victories drive diplomatic breakthroughs.
So you think
and right now the Russians are winning, and they're going to have a very good summer.
Is there anybody who's knowledgeable on this subject who believes Ukraine can, quote, win, which is to say push Russian troops all the way back to the old Russian border?
Well, I didn't really believe it ever.
I know that.
But I don't know who's advising the White House at this point or who they're listening to, but they probably need to change out their advisor list.
But then you have the Secretary of State, our buffoonish Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, boomer parody, showing up and telling the Ukrainians during his rock concert that, we're with you forever. Like, how could you say something like that when I've never met a single person who knows anything about the region who thinks the Ukrainians will achieve victory no matter how much money we send them? Like, how could you say something like that?
It's good money after bad. And all we're doing now is facilitating the demise of Ukrainian men and destroying them for future generations.
So how many have died? I've asked members of Congress who are funding this stuff.
Hundreds of thousands.
But why, here's what I understand. If you're paying for this war, which the United States is, the U.S. Congress is, Mike Johnson is, don't you have a moral obligation to know its consequences? Like, how can you get up there with a Ukrainian lapel pin and talk about the brave Ukrainian people who are being killed by the hundreds of thousands, and you don't even keep track of the casualties? Like, aren't you kind of a monster for doing that? I don't understand.
And you look at, if you made the pictures of the modern battle space on the front a little grainy and black and white,
yep,
it's indistinguishable from the Battle of the Somme or
right.
World War I.
Well, that's what it's exactly right.
Artillery, a grinding, crushing, pointless loss of humanity.
But it's being abetted by our policymakers. Like, they're responsible for this to some extent. Like, what?
And it's shocking how uniparty government has become.
You don't seem shocked that they don't care about how many Ukrainians have died.
They don't care about how many U.S. troops die. Right. Really.
Good point. No, it's a totally fair point. So
because they'll send U.S. troops to war with a whole bunch of cockamamie rules of engagement and policies, and it's just not a serious way to wage warfare. The whole premise of GWAT was that we could, by American magic and precision, we could always just clip off the head of the snake and the whole body would die of the snake. And that flies in the face of every kind of warfare. When you look back to World War II, we killed off 30% of the German male population. World War I, same. American Civil War, same. The continental wars in Europe in the 1800s, back to the Punic and Peloponnesian Wars. You destroy their manpower, their logistics, and their finance. This, cutting off the head of the snake, is a fool's errand.
Is there any precedent for it in history?
No.